The entire northern third of Africa was completely wiped out in the blast, leaving behind what we now call the Sahara Desert. You dig down 40 to 300 feet, and there's all kinds of toys there. Now notice, this is the only part of the earth that looks like that. Do you see that? It's this big, huge desert. Like everything else has been undisturbed, and probably if you waited another 500,000 years or something, it's going to come back. But this is only about, we estimate, based on multiple insiders I've talked to and trying to thread it with what was said in the Edgar Cayce readings and what was said in the Law of One, it appears that this happened 50,000 years ago. That this was the first big Atlantis on Earth that was wiped out 50,000 years ago, which both books, both the Edgar Cayce readings and the Law of One, point to a major, major war around that time that took place. As I said, the highlands of the original civilization was Egypt, and so they then built out stuff over what was originally there. So the Sphinx appears to be a recarving of an older monument, and the Great Pyramid is built on a big, big ridge of rock underneath. So as I said before, there's tons of technological artifacts under there, 30 to 400. I have to change that data based on new information. And the Egyptian priesthood went around and found some of these old books from people who were out there in our solar system. So what we find out is that the Library of Alexandria in Egypt was the storehouse for all these archaeological expeditions they were doing, finding these books that were made out of pages of almost unbreakable material, like made out of something like Kevlar. And that the books were then stored in the Library of Alexandria, which once it was invaded by the Romans, they did a false flag, and they burned only things like census documents and tax forms and kept all the good stuff and brought it to, guess where? The Vatican Library. So one of my oldest insiders, Dr. Pete Peterson, was invited to go to the Vatican Library and allowed to read some of these old books, and he said that some of them had like barcodes on them, and all it was digital-looking code on every page. Some of them had very elaborate images of spaceships and space stations and bases inside moons and all this stuff. And the Egyptian priests had been able to translate some of this stuff, and so there were also books of translations in ancient Egyptian language and Greek and Roman, things like this, of what the actual original books said. So the books tend to have a solid color on them, like you'll have a blue cover or a red cover that's all leather. The books tend to have a buckle on them, so you actually can buckle it like your pants to keep it closed. And again, most of the pages are kind of like an off-white color, and they're made of some kind of indestructible material. There's also a whole series of books that are made out of metallic plates that have engravings on them. So this is something that's being kept in the Vatican Library. They don't want us to know because it has the history of these people. Now, if you hear about the Illuminati, if you watch the movie Eyes Wide Shut,